Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Public Works for today, Wednesday, February 28th, the last day of the month already, 2018.
Commissioner Garcia, James, Davis, and Hacito are present. President James, we do have a quorum. May we start with Bureau introductions, please, starting with Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, Michael Patnay, Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, John Olinger, Bureau of Contract Administration.
Good morning, Ruben Flamenco, Bureau of Street Lighting.
Good morning, Craig Shaw, Bureau of Street Services.
Good morning, Brian Cowitz, LA Sanitation.
Good morning, Ted Jordan, Public Works General Counsel.
Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. President James, we have no commentary under the Neighborhood Council comment section. We also did not receive any speaker cards under general public comment and no speaker cards on any of the items for today's agenda.
Okay, then we'll close general public comment as well as the Neighborhood Council category of commentary. A couple of administrative items. Agenda item number 5, the release of a stop notice. Steiny Electric Company has transmitted the release of a stop notice in the amount of $250,207.49 for furnishing electrical work and labor in connection with the Soto Street Bridge over Mission Road and Huntington Drive Bridge removal and street realignment project. The contractor is PALP Incorporated, doing business as Excel Paving Incorporated. Is there a second to my motion that we receive agenda item number 5 forthwith by Commissioner Jacinto? Any objection? Without objection, we will do so. Agenda item number 4 is the bond to release a stop notice for Performance Mechanical. Performance Mechanical and Travelers Casualty and Surety Company have transmitted a bond to release money withheld on the stop payment notice filed by Mr. Crane Incorporated. The bond amount $65,836.95 for furnishing labor and material in connection with the Hyperion Treatment Plant Digester Gas Utilization Project, DGUP. The primary contractor for the project is Constellation New Energy Incorporated. Is there a second to my motion that we receive agenda item number 4 forthwith? By Commissioner Davis, any objection? Without objection, we will do so. Agenda item number 3, specifications are submitted for board adoption and authorization to advertise for the invitation of bids in Council Districts 1 and 13 for the Taylor Yard Bikeway Pedestrian Bridge over the Los Angeles River project. The estimate is $16,100,000. The bid receipt date is April 4th, 2018. Is there a second to my motion that we adopt agenda item number 3 forthwith? By Commissioner Jacinto. Any objection? Without objection, we will do so. We have a presentation this morning, certificates of recognition, outstanding achievement in diversity from Commissioner Davis, who will be making our presentation this morning.
Good morning, President James and my colleagues on the Board of Public Works and all of our leaders of the great Department of Public Works. Today is the last day of African American Heritage Month. I'm very happy to be here today and to also commend some prime contractors who've done outstanding work. I want to first start off by saying it has been a pleasure to have been appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti along with my colleague and Vice President Heather Repenning on the Ad Hoc Business Advisory Committee on Diversity, particularly focusing on the work and performance of prime contractors on what we have done and what we haven't done in the Board of Public Works. In terms of specifically construction, as you know, we do at least $400 million annually, $200 million of which are locally funded construction projects and $200 million of which approximately are federally funded construction projects. And we know that when we do business in the entire state of California, Prop 209 says that there cannot be preferential treatment based upon race, nor can there be it based upon gender. And yet, when we look very carefully at Proposition 209, it doesn't say that you specifically cannot hire Latinos. It doesn't say specifically you cannot hire Asians, and therefore it doesn't specifically say you cannot hire African Americans. But what it just simply does is it gives the authority to prime contractors to do their work in a way in which they could be fully accountable for the product that they are producing for those of us in government who are letting out these contracts. It is important when we look at what prime contractors do. As you know, in working on my doctorate degree, one of the things that I looked at was achieving diversity on local publicly funded construction projects in California, given all of what I have just discussed. And so I really do believe in our prime contractors and do believe that the work that they do determines our capabilities of how we're able to serve our constituents. And so one of the most important tasks that prime contractors have is to hire, but more importantly, to recruit. And one of the things that we have discovered is that those of us in government have to be able to provide an opportunity to assist our prime contractors in their recruiting. Just yesterday, I commend the Bureau of Contract Administration for having done a matchmaking event where we presented some potential minority and women and other firms that could potentially be recruited by our prime contractors in the future. Additionally, we do a small business academy, training individuals how to do business with the city of Los Angeles, focusing on how they can be better prepared, certified, and qualified to be selected for our prime contractors. We have two issues that are critically important when we look at this issue of contracting in the state of California in general, in Los Angeles in particular. That is, as we relate to our data in terms of what we have for those who are getting work, 95% of our work goes to majority subcontractors. And when we look at the data in terms of the population, one, and then number two, those who are in the industry, in terms of those who are business owners. When we look, this is African American Heritage Month, and the available businesses, business owners, just for example, if we looked at the African American community, approximately they are 7% of the population who's available. And yet, in terms of data, they are less than 1% who get the contracts. At the same time, even though the data is not as germane in terms of the population, it has a lot to do with the tax base. Approximately 10% of the population in Los Angeles. And I always say that when income tax comes, they don't tax the minority communities any less. So that is particularly why my area of research is achieving diversity on publicly, and I circle publicly, funded construction projects. Those projects for which we have had responsibility. And hopefully, in the future, we will tighten up the accountability. We have, as Jacinto has often said, say that public works is really reflected by Bureau of Contract Administration. And in that role, they inspect what we expect. Well, today I'm coming to tell you that we have to also reward what we applaud. We applaud prime contractors who are able to achieve diversity. But ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues on the board, one thing we have not done is we have not rewarded those that we applaud for their performance. Those who have not only simply recruited, but those who have also hired minorities. Today, it is certainly my thrill to present to you 3 prime contractors in this great Department of Public Works who have done what we think cannot be done and have heard can't be done time and again. And yet, we have 3 outstanding prime contractors who've been able to achieve that. In fact, they have been able to hire not only those who are underrepresented, meaning that those who have not been before available, but more importantly, these particular 3 firms have hired people who are underutilized. Again, those who are here, but just haven't been hired that much. And so it is my thrill to present to you 3 outstanding prime contractors who are doing what it is we're seeking to accomplish. They have been able to hire underutilized individuals in our community to do construction work as subcontractors. And so the first, I asked Con Ed for the top 5, and we picked 3 of those to honor today. And the first one is Jim DeFlavio, who is the president of Murray Construction Company. And is Jim here today? Okay, come on up, Jim. I want to thank Jim for the work that he has done and going out and making sure that there is diversity in those in which you have selected. And I know that qualifications and certifications, that's a given. Anybody that you hire, we would hope that it would have that. But you have gone above, beyond the call of duty to make sure that those that you have selected are part of this whole environment that we have, and that there have been great opportunities for them to thrive in your operation. And this is the kind of action that we like and reflect in the city of Los Angeles. The mayor talks about diversity. Again, he appointed Heather Repenning and myself to seek more diversity from other prime contractors. And I just want you to know, on behalf of the board, that you are an example of what we're looking for. And I thank you for your work and your performance.
Thank you very much.
Feel free.
These are the two gentlemen that really make it happen.
Okay,
So
great.
I wanted them to be very much.
Okay, good. If you like some further remarks, it's up to you.
Steve, you want to? I'm good.
Okay. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you.
No acceptance speech. All right, well, you don't leave yet. We'll have a couple of photographs. Go ahead, Commissioner Davis.
The second company that I want to commend is Powell Constructors, and Michael Powell is the president of that company. Is Michael here? Oh, yeah, good, very good. Michael, I want you also equally to know how appreciative we are of your ability to recruit those who have been underutilized and do work in the city of Los Angeles, and know that you too are an example of what we are seeking from other prime contractors like yourself, and we commend you for your performance.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
No.
Okay.
I think Mr. James asked that we don't.
No, go ahead. I was just saying
All I'll
that,
say is
they
thank you
didn't
for
want
the
to.
opportunity
Yeah.
in each of your organizations and parts of the agency. So
Thank
work,
you. We appreciate it.
administration and things. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And finally, this company was so busy they didn't know if they could come. But we told them we really appreciate the work that you do, but we also want you to know we appreciate your performance. And you're going above and beyond the call of duty. And again, reaching so far that you were able to not only just hire the underrepresented, but you, in fact, create an environment where the underutilized can thrive as well. And at this time, I'd like for Two Brothers Construction Company. They told me they were a very small company, and they were going to send someone from their firm today. Is anyone here from Two Brothers? Oh, good. Okay, great. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here, and I want, you're a woman-owned firm, right? Okay, good. So this is a female-owned firm, and I want your firm to know that you are an example of what we are seeking to have achieved by other prime contractors in the city of Los Angeles. Not only have you been able to hire small businesses, but you've been able to go out and to recruit those, again, who are underutilized in our city, and we are so proud of the performance that you have shown us. So thank you, and congratulations. And so, in summary, ladies and gentlemen, we want to grow as a board to not only talk about what we inspect and expect of our corporations, but we also want to, as I said, we want to reward those that we applaud for their work. And I think this is how we make a positive impact on our culture, and that other prime contractors will see and understand what it truly is that we are looking for. And so again, I thank you so much for this time. And as we end African American Heritage Month, these are some fantastic, outstanding examples of how the city of Los Angeles has been inclusive, even given the fact that prime contractors have the authority. We have prime contractors in our own midst who are doing the work and who are providing outstanding leadership. And I've just presented the top three to you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Repenning?
Commissioner Davis, I just want to thank you for all of your work and commitment on this issue. Having had a chance to partner with you, I appreciate the approach you're taking here, which is, we're always asking our bureaus to do better, but it's important to also shine the light on those examples of where we're actually doing well, and especially to shine the light on those companies that are making the effort that we want and need for them to make to actually put together inclusive teams and inclusive proposals. So to our contractors here today, I just want to thank you all for, number one, for working with the City of LA. I know we don't always, well, I'm not going to say that we don't always make it easy, but because, but we're improving, and it is quite important to this board that the funds that we're spending to build projects and to provide programs are actually funds that are going to support our local communities and our local economy. So thank you for being part of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Penning. Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. I want to congratulate and thank our colleague, Commissioner Davis, for that excellent presentation. I can't wait to call you Dr. Davis. And having a couple months, all right, and your doctorate in diversity, so it's all those wonderful D's. Commissioner Davis, that was wonderful. Thank you for contextualizing and excellent presentation again too. To our contractors, it's right, the leadership of Vice President Repenning, Commissioner Davis on our Business Advisory Committee is so important to the city to fulfill the mayor's vision of a prosperous city for all. And as diverse as Los Angeles is, the more that we could build communities by building businesses, by building families, by building neighborhoods is exactly the right thing to do. So please continue to do what's good, what's prosperous, and what's right. And that'll make you stronger companies, and you'll do better as you progress. You don't need any help from us. You're doing it already, so please continue. And thank you for the work and the achievements that you have built. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacinto. Let me also add that I'm thrilled, Commissioner Davis, that you brought these three companies here. And just to say their names again for our record, Powell Constructors, Murray Company, and Two Brothers Construction Corporation. Although, as Commissioner Penning mentions, when you indicated it's a woman-owned firm, so there might be a name change in order Two Brothers and a Sister. I'm not sure. Maybe that's been discussed already. But for all three of you, we greatly appreciate your efforts. You make us look better. You make our city look better. And not just look better, but you make us better. And you contribute to the improvement of our communities. And you've done so in an area that has proven in prior years to be more of a challenge than it should be. And through your example, we're able to use your efforts as proof that this work can be done and is done. And so we greatly appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come join us today. And congratulations to all of you. Commissioner Davis, thank you for your work and leadership on this, along with Vice President Commissioner Heather Repenning. We started something, you two have something good here that we will continue. And the timing of the year is great for the category of outstanding achievement in diversity. This is the right time of year, and there we go. So it was not by accident, of course, during award season, as a matter of fact. What we will do is we'll take just a brief recess for some brief photographs with our honorees, and then we'll be right back on our agenda. Thank you, everyone. Going back on our agenda, is there a second to my motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the meeting of Wednesday, February 7th, 2018, by Commissioner Repenning? Any objection? Without objection, we will approve those meeting minutes. Agenda item number 2, authority for expenditure, Thrifty Tree Services Incorporated, Bureau of Street Lighting, and Office of Accounting, requesting board approval and execution of an authority for expenditure in the amount of $34,250 to pay for trimming the trees covering the city's street lights. So come on up.
Good morning, President James, Commissioners, Department Heads. I'm Asad Al-Najjar. I'm with the Bureau of Street Lighting. This is the contract for tree trimming for a case-by-case emergencies. It's up to 50 trees. This is the contract number 5, and we've been doing this for the past 5 years, and it typically runs March 1st through December 31st. The contract has been signed by the contractor and our executive director and the city attorney and accounting. The way we do the outreach is we do email outreach to all the prospective companies, which we did on December 14. And we had an optional pre-bid meeting on January 10th, 2018. We had a few companies attending. The bids were received on January 19, 2018. We received 3 bids, and the lowest was the one being contracted to Thrifty Services.
And so just so that the record is clear, these trees are not covered in the existing contracts that are let out by the Bureau of Street Services. We separate this around the Bureau of Street Lighting because of your obvious relationship with the street lights themselves, and there are trees that affect street lights that are taken and accounted for and trimmed separately and apart from the work that is done with the various council offices and BSS regarding the standard tree trimming permits or tree trimming contracts, correct?
Yes, exactly. These are for emergency, like street light on a combination traffic pole on the corner and it's affecting the lighting level, or near a crosswalk. So it's really on extreme emergency, or like if there is work required by our crew and the light is in the middle of the tree. We have some even instances the pole is inside the trunk of a tree. So it's the extreme emergency.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Al-Najjar before we move along? All right. Is there a motion on agenda item number 2 by Commissioner Repenning? I'll second it. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 2. Any issues sending agenda item number 2 forthwith? We will send number 2 forthwith. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Agenda item number 1, Council District 11, Bureau of Sanitation, Memorandum of Understanding, Environmental Cleanup and Educational Awareness Program Supplemental Environmental Project, recommending that the board approve the attached Memorandum of Understanding with its transmittal and authorize the Director of the Bureau of Sanitation to enter into the proposed Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Los Angeles and Heal the Bay for the Environmental Cleanup and Educational Awareness Program Supplemental Environmental Project. Mr. DeFetta.
Good morning, President James, Commissioners, Bureau Executives, Mr. City Attorney, and Mr. Campos. My name is Tim DeFetta, Plant Manager, Hyperion Treatment Plant with LA Sanitation. I'm here before you today to get your authority to authorize our Director to sign an MOU with Heal the Bay. This is as a result of an action that Council took on January 30th, where Council approved a settlement agreement between the City and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. As part of that settlement, for $2.26 million, we are required to have 3 supplemental environmental projects. And one of the supplemental environmental projects is to have an educational awareness and environmental cleanup program. And that's what this MOU with Heal the Bay is going to do. So in essence, it's going to help improve the literacy of the community in terms of being aware of the environment, what to put into the environment and what not to put into the environment, be aware of water quality issues, be aware of how the city's storm drain and sewer systems work. And so as part of, and also in addition to that, there's going to be community-wide cleanups that will be cover the entire city. So the MOUs, Hill Bay will lead the effort, but it will consist of 11 other environmental organizations, and they're all listed from early water keeper, tree people, all the way surf riders, and so there's a long list of 11 organizations. The amount of this this settlement for this issue is about $210,000, and that's what I'm here before you. We will execute, we will implement 2 other supplemental environmental projects. Those are stormwater projects that are going to be in CD11, which was the district that was impacted. And this whole issue resulted from an event in 2015, which was unfortunate, where we had debris from an overflow 10 years earlier that was sitting in planned storm drain, hidden from sight. And when we executed the project, the material got flushed out. And so we worked through the issues, solved the problem through the help of the board and support of the mayor and council and everybody else. And we got the issues taken care of and resolved. And so this is the final conclusion in terms of moving the whole project forward.
Thank you, Mr. DeFetta. Commissioner Penning?
So, Tim, this is this is the settlement that we agreed to with the Regional Water Quality Control Board related to the issues that we had when we were repairing the 5-mile outfall. We went to the 1-mile outfall, and there was debris that was then ended up in the ocean and on the beach.
Yes, correct.
So as a result of that, we've now agreed to partner with a number of nonprofits to do cleanup work, outreach and education, all focused on water quality.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Penning. Commissioner Jacinto?
Thank you, President James. Tim, this is great. I remember that was, I learned what MOSA was.
Yeah.
And I learned what a big thing it was and having it show up on our beaches. And I think the technical hearings, the response from our Bureau of Sanitation was appropriate and was strong in terms of figuring out what was going on and involving the public and stakeholders to learn and to figure out how to prevent that from moving forward. And I know that was a citywide effort, so thank you for the efforts of the Bureau and the department for taking care of that. I will say that I think that the collective under the umbrella of Heal the Bay is excellent, having all 11 work together, and I think that this is, again, a model of how you can get it out to as many organizations geographically in the city to do education and outreach and cleanups is important, so I support this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. DeFetta. And I just confirmed with our, I don't have any questions, and we discussed the settlement agreement before board this morning, meaning me and you and I should say. But our city attorney did point out for me that the council action, I think it's action number 5, does provide the authority for me to execute the agreement. So during the oral presentation this morning, if you'll bring the originals around, I can multitask. I can sign the
gladly,
agreements.
thank you.
So you don't have to come back again.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate it.
It'll just take me a few minutes to do that during our oral presentation. But any questions during, or any additional questions regarding agenda item number 1? Is there a motion on number 1? Commissioner Penning, seconded by Commissioners Jacinto and Davis. Any objection? Without objection, we will adopt agenda item number 1. Thank you for your work on this, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any issue sending number 1 forthwith? We will send agenda item number 1 forthwith. Dr. Campos, have we cleared the desk of the voting items?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, agenda item number 6 is the City Administrative Officer's Fuse Fellow report, State of the Street-Related Infrastructure, by Ms. Alcaraz. This is an item, this report has been and remains in council committee through various stages. We're going to get a summary of the report in its entirety, the summary in its entirety, and we're waiting for the remote control for Ms. Alcaresh. Do we not have a, was it here earlier? No? Okay. Oh, we're looking for it.
We're going to have a manual clicker.
Okay, there we go. Yes. And I'm also informed, Ms. Huber was here this morning. Thank you for being here. To provide an introduction, as I mentioned, this was the City Administrative Officer's Fuse Fellow Report. Patricia Huber from the City Administrative Officer's Office. Good morning.
Isn't that awkward to say?
A lot of it, but yes.
I struggle with it myself.
You say it more than I do, probably.
Yes. We just call ourselves the CAO to make it easy. I'm the executive officer, and as President James indicated, my name is Patty Huber. About a year ago, or almost 2 years ago now, our office began looking at hiring a Fuse Fellow to look at the state of the city's sort of infrastructure delivery process. We were looking at having Measure M come in. During the course of the study, we also had SB1 come in, but we were just really looking at, are we optimally organized to deliver projects, particularly with such an influx of a huge new funding source coming into the city? And we had not too long previously, Measure R had come in just a few years prior to that. It was an extensive study, so we elected to use a fairly recent contracting model that the CAO's office holds the master contract for the city, but that's with the Fuse Corps Fellowship. And just for a little background, the Fuse Fellow program identifies and brings highly experienced and qualified private sector professionals, generally with 15 plus years of experience in the private sector and or public sector in some cases, to work on projects that have been identified and scoped by the local jurisdiction. What it does is it brings somebody with a lot of outside experience and perspectives to a government problem or identified issue, so that we can get sort of a objective, independent view of what we're doing and how we might do it better, including what we're also really doing well, because we don't always assume we're doing things wrong. We're just assuming, are we really doing it as best and as efficiently as we can? So we did enter into that contract. Those Fuse Fellows are for year-long, starting in September. So a year ago, September, Lila joined us. And the report that she will be presenting is the culmination of a very long, year-long intensive process involving the Department of Public Works and all of its bureaus, the Department of Transportation, our office, City Council, Mayor's office. Lila also spent time talking to key outside stakeholders, interviewing them and getting their perspective, and that included organizations like Metro, but also our bids and our neighborhood councils, just to get as broad a perspective on what it is we do and how it's perceived, both internally and externally. Lila also did extensive benchmarking against other cities, some of which you will see. The report that she created identifies 3 tiers of recommendations that would improve overall project delivery from her viewpoint, as well as improvements to specific processes or service delivery areas that were identified. The key recommendations included in the report are recommendations 1.1 and 1.2. Those two represent a very significant structural change for the city, including the transfer of the Department of Transportation to become a bureau in this organization, as well as creating a group of people to support you for the strategic planning for our capital. And she'll go into more detail on that. At this time, I would like to introduce Lila to you. She is our Fuse Fellow that authored the report. Since she is an outside consultant, you may have questions on very city-specific process and procedures, so I will be available to assist in those questions that are outside her purview. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Huber. As always, thank you. And I will note for the record that we were able to locate the remote control during Ms. Huber's presentation, so already productivity.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay? Great. Good morning, President James, distinguished board members. As you know, I've been fully dedicated to reviewing and analyzing the city's street-related infrastructure programs and associated programs for more than a year now. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the executive advisory team, as Ms. Huber mentioned before, but they included representatives from multiple council offices and committees, as well as the mayor's office, the office of the city administrative officer, members of this board. So from the very beginning, this has been an inclusive, data-driven project with all parties committed to improving the delivery of these services for our constituents. Today's agenda is to provide you a general overview of the completed project. So today I'll be discussing the project tasks that I was required to complete with the overall objective, the research methodology involved, the key barriers to optimal performance, and a set of recommendations for possible adoption by the council and the administration. Really quickly, the project tasks I was asked to complete were to assess the current state of delivery for the public works activities in the city, to evaluate options to coordinate services better, and to develop a long-term plan with specific proposals for improving accountability and service delivery. The long-term desired outcomes for this project are improved coordination with not only city departments, with our external partners as well, to ensure that these services are delivered in the most efficient and effective manner, and to improve the relationship between our residents and their government. So before we can begin to identify improvements in these services, we have to know the starting point. The graphic before you shows the current distribution of street, transportation, and right-of-way programs, with current corresponding commission oversight in black boxes across the bottom. Each color on this graphic represents a unique group. As you can note by the lines on the graphic from the various boxes, there are multiple parts of the public right-of-way that are touched by multiple entities. So essentially, we're competing to execute our programs on the exact same part of real estate in the street. All of these programs share space in the public right-of-way, but the planning and execution does not consistently is integrated in a way that benefits residents or minimizes inconveniences or disruptions to travel modes. The street itself is a binding element for all programs operating under, on, and over the street, and it is critical that these large investments made to the street are planned, executed, and protected to allow effective usage of the asset by the various programs that operate on its surface, like mobility, and below the surface, like the flow of safe drinking water. The research, design, and methodology for this project was rather extensive. First, I completed over 400 qualitative interviews with city staff, meetings with external partners, site visits of infrastructure programs, meeting observations, internal data analysis, benchmarking, and a problem-solving lab. Additional reports and research reviewed as part of this process included academic reports, city charter, the Los Angeles Administrative Code, past city consultant reports, city ordinances, controller office audits, media articles, metro reports, neighborhood council reports, white papers, past board reports, and past management audits. So this is a very inclusive, research-driven project. So the collective research showed 6 emergent themes across all of the different groups, and these are shown on the graphic in clockwise order. They are a lack of alignment, a lack of communication, a lack of coordination, a lack of customer focus, a lack of data or underuse of technology, and finally, a lack of proactive planning. Each recommendation within the report is tied to each of these themes, and every single recommendation in this report addresses multiple barriers to performance cited here. So I'll move into the recommendations by first outlining the organization of the report. So each recommendation, which are 13 in total, are tied to a tier. I'll be discussing tier 1, tier 2, and then tier 3. Each tier is assigned a recommendation based on specific criteria. So for tier 1 listed here, you have 2 recommendations which specifically address structural changes aimed to address all 6 barriers to performance. Tier 1 recommendations are also designed to make improvements to the city's infrastructure delivery ecosystem, meaning any program that needs or uses the public right-of-way to execute its programs. Recommendations within Tier 1 are considered highest impact, seeking near-term approval. Items reference multiple programs and/or departments, could begin in the near term but require time for full implementation, and the cost for implementation will vary. The benefits of this tier include removing fragmentation from decision-making and governance, creating better alignment and shared responsibility among street-related programs, and increasing accountability. For each tier of recommendations, I will pause for questions, considering the vast number of recommendations in the overall report. This is a quick graphic that shows you, in keeping with the core objective with the research, each of the barriers that the recommendations addresses. It also illustrates the potential budgetary and staff impact in great columns to the right. The first recommendation in the report is 1.1, transferring the oversight of the taxi and transportation commissions to the Board of Public Works, this body. This is important because of the heightened dependency of mobility programs on the city's infrastructure, the rising liabilities between these programs, the current lack of transparency and public input opportunities related to transportation programs. Establishing a unified governing oversight authority for public right-of-way programs will address all 6 barriers to performance identified by research groups. For alignment, consolidated oversight will help the board establish common priorities and goals across both hardscape programs and softscape programs like safety, and align contract standards and transparency. For communication, using the board's ability to see across silos will more quickly identify opportunities and timing of communications across street-related programs for maintenance and upgrade of city assets and program administration. For coordination, consolidated accountability creates better opportunity for optimal efficiency and minimizing traffic impacts in executing programs. For customers, our constituents, using the board as a primary vehicle for public stakeholder process and input addresses the lack of a consistent, regular, permanent, and transparent stakeholder process for transportation programs currently not in place. For data, having these programs reside in one place strengthens data-driven decision-making by having the ability to see issues and access data across the public right-of-way instead of single program silos. Currently, even if data is shared by transportation, there is no jurisdiction by this body or the taxi and transportation commissions to compel those programs to alter program planning or execution, although their actions will affect infrastructure programs in the city. And finally, the last barrier to performance planning. The board can assist with coordinated planning and execution for public right-of-way programs, which is not common practice today, which will enhance project delivery and tracking, potentially reduce vulnerabilities in the network, and help the city move from a reactive to proactive planning process. The second recommendation in this tier is 1.2, establishing an Office of Infrastructure Management for the city. This would be something that is, again, a first-time option, although there was a similar planning bureau in the late 70s within the Board of Public Works in the department. This office would be a permanent citywide resource and would survive administration and council changes. This office is proposed to sit within the Board of Public Works. Establishing a dedicated support planning function for public right-of-way programs will address all barriers to performance that were identified by research groups. Again, for alignment, this office could create the first ever long-term city vision for infrastructure programs in Los Angeles through the creation of a department-wide strategic plan, which could include common goals that are filtered to all groups that relate to public right-of-way programs. For communication, this office would look to the delivery of interdepartmental programs, including bottlenecks, resources, and timing of key program milestones. For coordination, this office would serve the city lead with our partners to actively manage traffic lane closures and utility activity. For customers, this office would look across silos to overlay maintenance and upgrade schedules to facilitate minimal inconvenience to users of the street. For data, this office will analyze past incidents to mitigate risks to the infrastructure network, and to identify customer needs through constant review of customer data and 311 service requests. And finally, for planning, this office could help with proactive project planning that overlaps multiple groups and aid the cities in demonstrating how projects align with citywide goals like the environment and mobility. I will briefly pause here for questions on Tier 1, which is 1.1 and 1.2.
So let me start, Lila, since you posed here, and I just want to be, since you paused here, and it's going to be the first foray with you, there are a couple things I need to say initially. And I do want to remind our colleagues to be mindful of everybody's time because we do have tiers 2 and 3 remaining as well. First of all, I want to say, and I want to thank you as well as others in the room for the amount of hard work that went into this. As you could understand, and you might have gleaned from Ms. Huber's introduction, the length of time of this project, the amount of involvement, the number of people that participated in the project under the leadership of the City Administrative Officer, Patty, yourself, sitting in on the executive team meetings, members of your team and your staff, and the support for the project is greatly appreciated. I had the honor, the privilege, the ability to participate, as well as our Vice President, Commissioner Penning. Thank you to the Mayor's Office and Deputy Mayor Barbara Romero, who is on the executive team, as well as Deputy Chief of Staff Matt Zabo, and the council offices as well. Council District 11 with Paul Backstrom, Council District 15 with Dennis Gleason, who is here today. Is he still in his reserved seat over there in the VIP section?
He stepped out.
Oh, he stepped out. Okay, Dennis was here a moment ago. He's listening or will be back, I would expect, but he was here a few moments ago. Thank you to him. David Hirano as well, and was here a few minutes ago. So there was a lot of work and coordination and just scheduling of getting everyone together. I want to say regarding 1.1, and I know that there was extensive discussion in the council committee about this that continues as this makes its way through the legislative process. Regarding 1.1, it's not so much of a question as it is, I want to say on the record here what I already put on the record in sum and substance in front of the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. My personal take on 1.1 is that our board is such a unique, and your report, which I have here, your report addresses this, and this was something that we recognize and has been discussed for years, even before we got here. Our Board of Public Works and the makeup of this design of municipal government for running the Department of Public Works is unique in many ways and very special. And one of the things that we are able to do is to bring public works to the community through this very process. Meetings every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning on issues that are so in touch with our constituency, like no other commission is able to do. We are full-time here because we are the only paid commission that enables the City of Los Angeles to have a full-time body like this. And we demonstrate it and improve it almost every meeting where we have actual hearings that we hear from competing sides. Sometimes it's more than two sides on an item. Just in the last 2 or 3 meetings, we had 3 different sides on an item. We had a property developer, we had opponents to the project, and we had the Bureau of Street Services with their positions. So sometimes you have more than 2 sides of an issue. And through our deliberative process, iterative process, you name it, and public process and transparent process, we're able to do some amazing and unique things. And what I said to the committee is that I believe that our Board of Public Works is a great place for the issues that touch transportation and are centered around transportation, particularly related to what will be Measure M funds, as well as Ms. Huber referenced, as well as SB1 funding, that it is a terrific opportunity. That said, and I guess I do have a question, and it's a question Ms. Alcaraz, that I know you answered in committee, and it's summarized in the report, but we make an oral record here as well. And while my position as president of the board in front of the committee was that our board, because I know from our work, stands ready, willing, and able to do whatever the recommendation is adopted by, by the collective authority of our building. Like I said, I think we're a unique place for it. I do think it's important for the record to indicate that would there be any, if recommendation 1.1 were implemented, would there be any duplication such that labor would need to be concerned about loss of jobs? Would there, are there things like that? Is there a budgetary element to 1.1? And then after you answer that, I want to go to 1.2 because there is a budgetary element to 1.2, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. But let's start with 1.1, recognizing that it's addressed in your slide, but I want you to put a bit of an exclamation point on it for us.
Sure, so I went back to slide 8, so to bring up the chart on 1.1 and 1.2, and the chart shows all 6 barriers to performance, which are indicated here, but there are 2 gray columns to the right, which indicate budgetary impact. As board president has indicated, 1.1 would require no fund transfer at all because all employee tasks would remain the same. All funding, leadership, programs would remain as they were the day before, so there would be no labor impacts by the transfer of responsibilities from the taxi and transportation commissions to the board, and no employee impacts for that specific recommendation as written in the report. For recommendation 1.2, that would be a brand new office. For the city, I have 4 different options.
Oh, before I don't want to go to 1.2 yet.
Oh, okay, we're still on 1.1.
Yeah, because I want to ask a different question on 1.2.
Okay, yes. So as written,
yeah,
there is no potential labor impacts to employees. Okay, I'll let.
When it comes to 1.1, obviously the functional transfer could be made. It is possible that employees through their bargaining units might request to do impact bargaining. They are required to identify those things. We don't see, but that doesn't mean that an employee might not see, and our office through our employee relations would engage in any necessary impact bargaining as a result of that if it's implemented and impacts are identified by employees.
Okay. And I recognize that this discussion is continuing, but that's just a question that I wanted to at least have on the table here. So thank you, Ms. Huber, and Lila as well. Let me go to on 1.2. And with 1.2, I want to thank David Hirano, who's back here, in the sense that I know he assisted in our assisted significantly, frankly, in our budget proposal for 1.2 for the Office of Infrastructure Management, and that there is a reference of budgetary impact, no current employee impact, and I believe, and we've discussed this internally, with what it would mean, and I know that, again, it's something that would be considered for this budget year. I believe that the budget proposal was for 4 positions. Am I correct, Mr. Hirano? Is that, am I getting too into the weeds? Okay. So I don't know where it will end up, but that's the initial proposal. And so there is a budgetary impact for the Office of Infrastructure Management because you want to staff it properly to be able to do the kind of work that would need to be done there. And we currently don't have the existing capacity for that. So I wanted to mention that as well. Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. I'm going to second and agree with all your thanks and appreciation. So much work has gone on, Lila. Thank you for your year with us. I just had a question in terms of, and forgive me if it's been stated before, the rationale and what I see is all our city departments. It doesn't include a major stakeholder and player in the public right-of-way that impacts our streets and our roads, and that's the Department of Water and Power. Can you comment a little bit about I just need that for the record, understand that, please?
Yep, sure, you're absolutely correct. DWP is an important partner with the city because they're in the middle of the largest water main upgrade in its history, and so obviously their need to access underground assets like the water main lines do cut into our streets and impact the overall surface area that a lot of our users, whether you're on a bike, walking, in an Uber or a bus, you are impacted by those cuts, not only by DWP, but by other utility partners, including city departments. Where I see DWP's participation, because they are a wholly owned municipal utility, is better coordination and better communication. Right now, there's a lot of work happening, for instance, when they are making water main upgrades, but they don't necessarily call for final inspection, and that could apply to every single utility partner. And so if we could sort of tighten those communication links with our stakeholders over in the other departments, I think that that would help support the extended lifespan of the asset. And I remember a lot of these underground assets are protected by the street. So there needs to be a sort of a shared responsibility and ownership of the surface of the street in recognizing the role that these assets that are underneath the streets are actually protected by the surface. And so I did interview many people, just to let you know, for DWP as part of this project, and I think they're very interested in tighter communication links. I think the struggle for them, and what was also cited by other external partners, is because we're so siloed, they have to go to multiple stakeholders. And I think the Office of Infrastructure Management, being one single office, could serve as a single point of contact, which would help streamline a lot of that difficulty and frustration that people feel by going to multiple entities.
Thank you, Lila. President James and colleagues, I just want to go on record by saying I think this is an absolute essential aspect of this system as we go, that coordination, collaboration, communication, it's probably a little bit more than that. And I just want to be on record by saying there's got to be an interdependency between our proprietary department and our city because of these things that Lila has daylighted, and we see them on the roads every day. It's just in front of us, and we have to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sindo. Commissioner Penning.
Hi. I just wanted to ask a couple questions. One is that when Patty made her introduction, she referenced some new funding sources that are going to be coming online that we obviously need to plan for. What are those funding sources specifically? What are we looking at in terms of new programs?
Councilmember, at the time that we first scoped this project, Measure M was in development with Metro. That has since been approved by the voters and is now, we're receiving those revenues, and we have begun programming them into our street reconstruction and Vision Zero programs, as well as some other things, but those are taking the bulk of the money. During the course of this, also the state legislation on SB1, which is now also a funding source that we are beginning to program again for street reconstruction and Vision Zero projects.
So how much new money annually are we expected to see?
I'm going to have to get back to you because I actually don't remember the budgets for both of those funding sources, but unless David knows off the top of his head.
He popped up.
We are looking at so many funding sources in the course of the budget
I know
right now.
you guys are
I've
running
got them
numbers all
all
day long.
confused, and is it this year's money, next year's amount? I don't know.
Mr. Hirano, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. David Hirano with the Office of CAO. Commissioner, in fiscal year 17-18, we're projecting about $37 million that's new to the budget for Measure M, and about $24 million. I'm sorry, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so it's an average. That would be new to the budget for SB1. And in 18-19, those numbers will go up significantly. I think we're still developing those revenue estimates as part of the mayor's budget, but they will go up from there in the new year.
That is good news. I know that one of the issues we've had at Street Services has been, due to the impact to the Bureau during the recession when a lot of cuts were made, the need to build back the capacity there to actually expend allocated funding for street repair and reconstruction there have been some challenges there, and so now we're getting even a lot more money than what's in our general fund. So I think having been part of the discussion that you led, I think part of the thinking is that we want to make sure that we are, in terms of planning and programming and actually spending that money, that we're, fully locked in on collaboration, on bringing innovation, on the best and brightest ideas to getting that money out into our neighborhoods. And so I know that that was really part of where this 1.1 is kind of coming from. How do we ensure the integration that we need on those street-related programs, given that we have the opportunity to leverage that money to do a lot? And I know on 1.2, so 1.2 would obviously, the office would obviously be involved in that thinking, but that wouldn't be limited to transportation or public right-of-way infrastructure projects. We have a lot of other things that we're doing on water, on...
Yeah, so some of the other things, we haven't gone to Tier 3 yet, but I mentioned that the Office of Infrastructure Management, OIM, could also be used to help improve the contracting process from the great work that you guys have already started with the ad hoc committee, analyzing some of the contractors in the city to see if they actually fulfill their responsibilities, how many times we're issuing change orders. There's a lot of capacity and a lot of potential for this office. It's just scoping those initial responsibilities, making sure that the initial staffing, whatever that looks like when it happens, can be set up for success. So we don't want to overload the office from the beginning with 50 different projects. I think it's extremely important to start off in a very focused, maybe 1 or 2 initial priorities, show success, quick wins there, and then continue to expand the scope as needed.
So one of the reasons that I thought that this would be for sure useful to me is, working a lot on water with sanitation, with engineering. We're talking a lot about new kind of project delivery models. There's some interest in P3s, there's some interest in design build, and we have different opinions in the department about what the best way to get these things done. There's if we get the funding that we need on our local water supply, the mayor's goals for a local water supply, it's going to be a lot of work. We're obviously working with the county on a water quality / resilience funding measure that is potentially going to be on the ballot in November. And we don't currently at the board have the capacity to evaluate those decisions. We just don't. And so I think this would be useful for us in helping the leaders of the department, providing, really some hard data-driven analysis on what the best value, the most efficient means to achieve these projects are going to be. And I personally would find that quite useful.
Thank you, Commissioner Repenning.
Definitely the intent of the office.
So thank you. Onward to Tier 2.
Okay, so the second tier in this report is about support systems improvement. This includes 6 recommendations that address multiple barriers to performance. Tier 2 recommendations are designed to support the city's infrastructure delivery ecosystem. The items reference multiple programs and/or departments. They could begin in the near or long term, and the cost for implementation will vary. A similar chart to you saw before on Tier 1 is applied here for the 6 recommendations in Tier 2. As you can see, that every recommendation in this tier addresses the lack of coordination, data, and planning. And for simplicity's sake and time's sake, I've actually grouped these recommendations in 3 categories for discussion: policy governance, asset management, capital planning, and technology. So the first group on policy and governance is 2.4 and 2.6. The first one is street protection policies. I'm aware that there is an impending report back for the SDRF study, which relates to this recommendation, so I won't delve into this too much because I know you guys will have a full hearing on that particular study that's coming up pretty imminently. So just as an overview, 2.4 references current city policies that protect our city streets. The first one is the SDRF, or the Street Damage Restoration Fee. This fee was passed by City Council in 1998 as a means to discourage unnecessary cuts into the street. There has not been an adjustment to this fee. There was no built-in CPI or inflation factor, so the exact fee that was passed by City Council in 1998 is the exact same it is today, 20 years later, although costs to maintain the streets, including labor and materials, have gone up. So essentially what this recommendation 2.4 is putting forth in the report is to update these policies. Again, that's in line with the SDRF study that is coming out before the board soon, and the intended improvements, I think, align with the recommendations in the report, which include recovering the full cost of maintaining streets with reduced lifespan from the street cuts, protecting newly reconstructed streets, which is a brand new program the city is initiating this year through SB1 funding, and that is for both asphalt and concrete streets by coordinating underground utility work and anticipated maintenance work. Eliminating the lack of fees for our older streets, as these streets have a higher cost of maintenance, and finally just keeping the street in a state of good repair for the users of the street. So 2.6 is about governing overlapping governance. There are several programs in the city that have multiple agencies touching the asset, particularly for tree management in the city. First, the city lacks a tool, frankly, to track entities that are touching our trees. So there are about 9 different agencies, we include private owners as well, that are actually doing some kind of maintenance or activity on our street trees. And right now, we don't even have a common nomenclature for those trees. So if there are 5 trees on a city block, one of them might have been touched 5 times by 5 different agencies, and the other 4 streets, or trees rather, may not have been touched by anyone. And so what we want to do is actually come up with a common nomenclature, name our trees the same way, and so we're able to identify when and where people are actually touching our streets to leverage the limited funding we have to, again, enhance our urban canopy and provide the environmental benefits that we want for our citizens. So that's a large part of 2.6 that's discussed in the report. And again, making these adjustments to these policies and is intended to provide the following improvements: proper care and maintenance leads to an extension of the life of the asset, hoping that our trees last longer. Defining the asset in the same way across entities. Example would be naming a tree through a number protocol that is followed by all of the agencies tracking or maintaining our trees in the city. Leveraging the collective resources of internal and external partners to maintain a greater number of assets. As you know, our trees are not funded to the level they need to be, and so partnering and leveraging that funding across different groups will be helpful for the city. And finally, creating a central place that multiple agencies can access to see, store, and update maintenance schedules, so we know when someone is touching a tree in a city block and how we can adjust our maintenance schedules accordingly. So I'm going to pause here again for 2.4, 2.6, again recognizing the SDRF study is coming before you, but I'm happy to answer any questions related to the report on 2.4, street protection policies, or 2.6, overlapping governance.
So on the street protection policies, yes, just notice to our colleagues, we do have the SDRF report coming from the Bureau of Street Services. You said imminently, Ms. Alkrish, and you are correct. It will be, I expect, in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, and then the City Council Committee is very interested. The Controller's Office certainly very interested. I've been in constant communication with them about it as well. So that will be an exciting report for us coming soon with all kinds of detail. The other thing I want to mention is on the electronic utility coordination system.
So we haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm
only on 2.4 and 2.6. Yeah. Great. Nothing else yet. Go ahead. Anything else on 2.4 or 2.6? Commissioner Davis.
I just wanted to get a clarification as you speak about on 2.4, the elimination of lack of fees for older trees and the extending of street lifespan. We're talking about kind of metacognitively looking at the resources or the lack of resources we put on our older streets and kind of refocusing those resources to that area, giving more thought to how we need to have more resources in those streets. Is that pretty much what we're capturing?
Yeah, so essentially what was found through the research is that we estimate the life of a street to be like 30 years for a residential street and like 20 years for a commercial corridor, but obviously the city isn't funded to the level to come back and actually repair within that window of time. And so when the SDRF fee was established, they actually stopped collecting fees after the street reaches the age of 30 or the age of 20, depending on the type of street. But obviously there are streets in the city that are 50 or 80 years old, but we're not collecting fees when people actually cut into those streets. but those streets have a weakened base already because they're older. And so every time you cut into an older street, beyond that lifespan, it actually diminishes and affects the base even more. But we're not collecting the extra maintenance cost at this point in time.
Did you deal with, or is this the appropriate time to talk about our practice and our policy? Is that in another area of the study?
I think that there's a very extensive SDRF study that talks about that particular component, and I think just this particular recommendation is just in an alignment with that one. So I want to offer you the time with the experts coming in to actually have the questions answered in more greater technical.
Those are inextricably tied together, I think.
They are. They are.
Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Okay, go ahead.
So the second section in this tier, and I'm just going to go over really quickly a policy that the city has related to utility tag markers. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but once a city actually, the city has a requirement that city departments and utility partners working in the public right-of-way for maintenance or upgrade of underground assets is required to ID the workspace by installing a metallic medallion that's about the size of a quarter or less. That's the figure that you see on the left bottom of the slide there. This is a round metal coin. It's nailed into the surface of the street or the sidewalk, and again, it serves as an identifier that you have an asset or you've done work in that part of the street. Right now, the issues relating to this medallion are that they're often not placed in the trench where the work is happening. They get displaced. It lacks a date, so we don't actually know when the work was completed, and it makes it very difficult when an inspector shows up to identify when and where that work was done. And so what cities like New York, Pittsburgh, and Boston have actually done is they have a medallion requirement when you cut into the street, but they've actually switched from a metal medallion to a color-coded medallion. And some of the benefits in changing the policy include improved accountability for every legal cut. So if you can imagine if you're riding your bike or you're skateboarding or walking down the street and there's a pothole or something, and if you call 311 and now you can say, is there a color anywhere in the patch? It's pink. We know it's DWP, or we know that it's a partner, we know it's a city department, and that makes it very easy for us to identify the right resource or the right group that needs to come and remedy that issue with the street. And again, it serves as an instantaneous identifier. The added benefit of the color medallion here, you can see in the middle of the green marker there's a year. So this one says 12. So the city has a 5-year warranty on utility cuts that we are not able to enforce to the level we'd like to because we don't have enough inspectors. And so by having the year just written plain language onto the medallion, we can see that that cut is actually within the 5-year period. So if it is a utility partner, we know to issue a notice for remedy to the partner to fix that road issue or deficiency, or we know that if it's beyond the 5 years, it becomes the city's responsibility. So it becomes very easy then to identify the right resources internally or externally to remedy the part of the street if there's an issue with a past utility cut. And finally, again, it provides an incentive to permittees to do the best possible work because you're going to have a very clear identifier, and we want to make sure to motivate our partners who are working the street again to do the best job possible. So I just wanted to identify that as a best practice, which I found very fascinating, and people really spoke very highly of this as something that they considered as one of their top 2 ways that they actually monitor, maintain, and preserve the street. Are there any questions about the policy change before I move on?
Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you. Really quick, Lila, I want to talk about just best practices, yes, and it goes back to budget. I don't know if you're going to get there, but if our inspectors, especially our Bureau of Contract Administration, is not able to get there, there's not a medallion that's placed there, we don't know the works, and it's in limbo. So we have to be real in terms of this is only one part of a system that needs to be funded for infrastructure for enforcement, so that we can monitor it. So the medallions are great. They're color-coded. I love it. I've been out there with the Bureau of Engineering. But if we don't have support from our BCA, our Bureau of Contract Administration, they don't exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacinto. Go ahead.
Great. Okay, moving on to the next group, asset management capital planning recommendations 2.2 and 2.5. These are linked together because they really operate hand in hand. And just as a preface, there is also an impending report back on this set of recommendations. That's Council File 13-1384 that was introduced by Councilmember Blumenfield. And as I understand it, the Office of the CAO is working on building out a framework and criteria that will hopefully lead to a reinstitution of a capital policy for the city to make large investments. So again, I'll just identify from a broader overview standpoint why these things are necessary for the city in the context of infrastructure. So first of all, asset management, as is described in the report, is basically the city's lack of a consolidated inventory at present for infrastructure assets. So the absence of information like asset location, age, condition makes it very difficult to make strategic decisions about when and where to upgrade assets. And the data that is stored that we do have available is stored across different types of files, which makes it very difficult to consolidate. So some asset information is on spreadsheets and Excel files, other on homegrown systems. There's differences in nomenclature. And so it's really not accessible across groups in any real fashion to help make better decisions by this board or by council members or city administrative leadership as well. So in addition, there's no estimated life cycle analysis that the city can use to predict end of life for an asset for street replacement purposes. And that impacts us because then we start introducing liabilities in the network and vulnerabilities. And so we can't predict when and where an asset might fail. And it puts the city on the hook for liabilities. So prioritizing asset management is intended to provide the following benefits. First of all, obtaining the best performance from city-owned assets, better controlled over deferred maintenance costs, because as you know, deferred maintenance costs are highly expensive compared to preventative maintenance. Controlling our risk exposure as a city, and finally minimizing inconvenience to residents to, again, coordinate street work in a way and in a similar time frame so we're disrupting our users as little as possible. 2.5, which feeds into asset management, because obviously asset management is the data that you need to make decisions for a capital investment plan. The previous capital improvement plan served as basically a list of large projects in the city, but did not serve as a true expenditure plan. So today the city is really unable to see the universe of infrastructure needs because of the way the city manages individual asset maintenance and upgrades. And so the city also lacks universal guidelines in making investments for its streets. So the recommendation offers several potential benefits for reinstituting the plan, including supporting city leaders in making smart investment decisions, ability to time investments and upgrades based on the greatest need, irrespective of asset category, leveraging funding across categories and sources for large investments, and finally, providing taxpayer value in preserving, using, and protecting city assets. So I'm going to pause here, and again, recognizing there's an impending report back, but I'm happy to answer any reports or questions related to 2.2 and 2.5. That's asset management and capital improvement plan.
No questions?
Okay. So the final section here is technology upgrades, and I think this is what the board president was referring to earlier, 2.3 and 2.1.
I jumped ahead.
You
Go
did.
ahead.
So the first one is the LA 311 system. Through the research, we found this to be the most improved service, the one that was really valued by our constituents through the survey process, which is one of the research groups. This service was also the highly rated across the bid consortium through the data research as well. So just to give you some context, until January of this year, all 50 service categories within the 311 system were all public works. Essentially, it was a public works intake system. The difficulty in the 311 system is that we collect information about service gaps, but actually all of those service requests are not funded or they're preset at the beginning of the fiscal year. And so in particular, the limited messaging options are problematic because what we end up doing for these unfunded requests or the preset program service request categories is we end up closing the service request without really offering any real communication to our user on why it was closed without fulfillment. And so what you can consider is if you were to put in a request for resurfacing, that is a program that is preset at the beginning of a fiscal year, is instead of just closing it without comment, a better idea would be perhaps installing a pop-up screen that says, thank you for providing information on a service gap in the city. We will take this into consideration in our planning process for the next fiscal year. Please click here to see if your street is on the list. And that to me provides a better customer experience than the frustration that a lot of our users expressed in getting a closed notice without actually remedying the service gap. So that's the first one. The second one is that we actually have some categories that are quite lengthy in process. So if you have ever used a system to put in an illegal dumping or homeless encampment category, there's no less than 40 different category types for that thing. You cannot skip them. You have to put in how many tarps you see, shopping carts, mattresses, etc. And then the next screen asks you to put in a count of how many of those items you see. So if you are driving and you're trying to remember by memory how many of whatever you saw, it's very difficult. And so a lot of the times what's happening with those service requests, I think, is that people are stopping midstream. We're actually probably not capturing all of the requests that are in the city across all 470 square miles. And so what I'm asking for is instead of prioritizing our operational experience and looking at, the size of the truck or the type of the waste stream, which are also important questions, is really balancing out the customer experience and looking at different ways to capture the same information without having people to fill out a very lengthy 40-category form or process to provide information to the city. So that's the second one. So making improvements to the LA 311 system is expected to provide the following benefits. First of all, we want to set proper customer expectations about when a customer request will be fulfilled, especially for unfunded or pre-programmed services. We want to share better information on why a request has been closed without action. We want to reduce the time to input certain service request types. We want to build capability to provide custom messages to LA 311 users. And finally, we want to ensure that we have links to transparent information like the resurfacing plan where it's appropriate. So that is the recommendations that came out for, again, focusing on the lack of customer focus, which is one of the key themes and barriers to performance for the report. The second technology recommendation here is about utility coordination. The city currently struggles to manage over 200 plus utility providers that are maintaining underground assets in the street. There is a right-of-way coordinating unit within the Bureau of Street Services that currently manages this function. There are approximately 10 people there, split between coordinating street cuts and serving the city street network. BSS estimates that its staff spends approximately 40% of their time on the phone. And basically, they are trying to help coordinate our partners in delivering maintenance activities while trying to fulfill our resurfacing plan and keep that plan on track. This process is currently a manual one with multiple spreadsheets being sent back and forth to employees' emails. These spreadsheets often become outdated as changes occur. There are also certain streets that are placed on indefinite holds and continue to decay when work does not materialize by our partners. So the lack of a tool to really manage this function restricts the city from seeing the collective work happening in the city and burdens our employees to flip through spreadsheets and attempting to piece together right-of-way work that affects other city programs like pavement preservation. In addition, the city lacks the ability to resolve conflicts from entities that want to work on the same street within a similar time frame, thus minimizing inconvenience to our residents who are trying to travel to and from work, leisure activities, commuting, picking up their children, etc. So converting the manual process to a system could result in the following improvements. First of all, automating plan uploads and changes to a system that is able to geocode locations within the system provides better transparency about what is happening across council districts, across neighborhoods, and on our citizen streets. Second, we want to serve as a planning tool by adding data bridges by other relevant departments like building and safety. This link would help us anticipate future construction work and future development and prevent us from resurfacing streets that might have development work in the future. We want to embed conflict resolution so the system recognizes multiple entities' intent to work on the same street and alert all relevant parties in a way which we are unable to do currently, including council offices, utilities, city operations staff, and the public. This system would have public viewpoints, which we're unable to see at the present, so they're able to predict and see where activities like protests, parades, traffic lane closures, constructions, etc. are all in one place. This would also have filtered views for our partners like utility partners, our city departments, our council staff as well. So really it's providing a level of transparency that we just don't have at present. This system was the #1 thing recommended through benchmarking as a way to have visibility to our infrastructure network. And finally, we want to support our partners that need access to the streets to maintain our assets. So this would provide them better information about when the city plans to do work on a street versus when they plan to do work on a street. And finally, again, we want to apply transparency to our customers. So I know Board President has some questions on 2.1. I'm going to pause here for technology upgrade questions. And again, this is related to 311 system upgrades and the utility coordination function. I have some case studies here, but I'm going to pause for questions.
One of my questions relates to one of your case studies by just putting an exclamation point on it. But just anecdotally, I was going to share with you, and then you kind of stepped in front of it with information that I didn't. If you had told me it before, I did not remember it. What you said, it was the #1 utility coordination was the #1 benchmarking.
Yeah.
And that's consistent with what I experience anecdotally in my communications with people that are very involved in the process, or at least involved in the process. If I'm talking to just a constituent on the street, it's not typically the first thing they mention about public works. But anytime I'm talking to somebody who works in our system that is the number one request and number one concern and number one revision reform they would like to see. I find myself regularly explaining how complicated it is, recognizing that it is not an easy lift and there are budgetary implications. That said, that takes me to my question, and it's a rhetorical question, but it is a question. On your City of Chicago case study, overall savings to date of $108 million, that's not a typo, right? That's my question. That's a lot.
That is not. And that's, as you can see, the system they installed there was from 2014, so that's within 4 years. That's
$25 million a year, yeah.
Essentially, right. So last year, I think they estimated, they gave me a number of $28 million for last year. That was 2017. So if you can imagine, if you have 133,000 permits going through, the number of cuts that are happening in the city and how they would even begin to manage that process without having the visibility of a system to help them navigate and do active conflict management. So the savings to date, and just to clarify that number, is basically a saved restoration cost. So it's not, hard dollars that the city is receiving, although we do collect fees every time a city entity or a utility partner cuts into the street. This is actually, savings to date means shared restoration costs, and this is really important for our utility partners to hear because essentially if you are having a development, there's a guarantee to have 4 different cuts into a development, right? So you're going to have water main connections, sewer connections, telecom, and gas. Those are guaranteed. So essentially sometimes a lot of those connections are in the same part of the street, and so we don't want 4 different entities cutting to the street 4 times, especially if it's in a similar geographic area. And so the savings has really come from creating, maybe 1 or 2 cuts into the street. Instead of spending maybe $10,000 to actually restore that street, you split the cost. So then you become $5,000. So for entities that are profit-driven, like some of our partners are, that actually is a win for them because we're, through active conflict management, through the system, you're actually able to save money and coordinate better with the access to the system and access to city staff. So through shared restoration costs, and this number here, $108 million, again, 4 years, but if you even look at city of Seattle, which has had a system for less than 6 months, they've already seen gains of $3.5 million. And just to, again, put exclamation points to the board president's point, 2017, Chicago discussed 900 conflicts, which consisted of over 10,000 overlapping projects, which resulted in third parties paving 10 miles of streets and installing 1,700 ADA ramps as part of their street work and coordination efforts. Seattle went from coordinating 3% of streets to 100 perfect coordination or 100 street coordination after installing the system. And as an added bonus, they actually overlay their capital improvement plan in the system as another use case for having this type of system in place. And finally, just for the city of Boston, they actually will not issue a permit to any entity that does not upload their plans to the system. So this has been their key to achieve 100% coordination because they are able to see and predict when those utilities are going to work in the street and then think about resurfacing the top of the street after that work has been completed. So it's a really important thing. I think it's a no-brainer for the city. Again, the #1 benchmarking request across all 25 of the top cities. LA is actually one of the few agencies that are still doing a manual process. I really couldn't even find other people who were using spreadsheets when I did my interviews with other cities. So this is really a large opportunity for the city that will reap enormous benefits, I think, in the long term. And if you think about a very large global event that's happening in the city in about 10 years called the Olympics, I think this would be a valuable tool to have in place.
Well, you once again stepped right into the point that I want. So, one, the exclamation point on the Olympics coming, but Ms. Alcarosh, I think the report is significant, obviously. I think this is the most prominent part of the report for reform, in my opinion. Others may have different opinions, but because of where I live and where I sit, I think this one is it. I also will tell you that I believe that the savings in those case studies are, with credit to what is there, is woefully lacking because the private sector will tell you that on major projects, they're saving at least that much money on just time sometimes and not getting behind on projects, all kinds of things. The economic opportunity, economic cost, opportunity cost, all kinds of things are very significant here. And so when I was thinking about that, and I'm looking for what can we argue or promote to finally help us get across the bridge, it's the Olympics. And you use the term no-brainer. So I think this is a chance really for so many of our city departments to work together, and everyone benefits. Yes, there's a budgetary investment up front, but we really start to see that return on investment, as Seattle will show you, within months, not even years.
So within the first 2 months, they actually saved $800,000 just as.
So for this aspect of this report, whatever we can do, you certainly have my support. I'll start with Commissioner Penny.
On the utility coordination office or program, I assume they would also take on some of the work around our above-ground facilities and the telecommunications infrastructure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that relates to utility coordination, right?
Which is a need we have as far as really pushing the use of existing city infrastructure. And we think that there's revenue to be made there as well versus these folks going out and building everything new.
Can help pay for the cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Penny. Excellent. Are we done? Okay, yeah. Just wanted to add that I think that revenue could be used to cover what our budgetary costs are. Thank you, Commissioner Penny. Commissioner Davis?
I just wanted to thank her overall. Is it that time?
Not yet.
Okay.
We have one more tier.
One more tier. I'm sorry, I'm trying to cram 400 pages into less than an hour.
But thank you. But so again, I think this one is kind of what I put at the top of the stack for opportunity for reform. Commissioner Garcia.
Hi. I know that you're talking about the different systems that the other cities are currently using. Is there, and I know small briefing, we had a small meeting and so forth, but I'm wondering, is there a way that we can see an example of how they use it? And is that something that we would want to adopt here instead of trying to create everything from scratch? I know that this has to go through so many layers and so forth, and we're not even there yet. But, I'm sure you saw the systems and you saw how it actually works, the pragmatic pieces of this, and the customer delivery of this. So I think as we move forward, is there something that we can see, and interact and see how it would work for us here in the city?
So let me just mention a couple of things related to anything like a pilot potentially or a system, is that this particular recommendation has actually been referenced multiple times and studied multiple times in the past, so we're not necessarily starting from ground zero here. So in this report section, you will see that there's a lot of footnoted reports and council files that refer back to this function. And I know in 2014 they even looked like they were on the brink of actually doing something more substantive related to this function. So we wouldn't be starting from scratch. It looks like there's a couple of out-of-box solutions here. What I've been told recently from ITA is that they're pushing towards more out-of-the-box solutions rather than homegrown internal systems which require sort of like constant upgrades. The benefits you would get from the out-of-box solution would be the monthly upgrades, the cloud server, et cetera. And so you really have the latest and greatest that are built into your maintenance cost. And so there's just a choice that the city needs to make. Now, I recommended a pilot. I think other cities have started that way as well, just to see, because a lot of companies will come in and promise you the world. But, we're Los Angeles. We're trying to serve 470 square miles, and we want to ensure that the promises they're making are actually delivered. And so that's why I would really advocate for perhaps a pilot, perhaps a free pilot, frankly, to see if they can really meet the needs of the city, because this is meant to be an integrated system that involves probably a dozen or more different departments, having those data bridges in place and making sure that the transparency and the visibility I described for all of those stakeholder groups is delivered upon. And so if you look in the report, if you wanted just to see some user interfaces on page 83 and 84, there's some samples of the most common systems that are out there.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Go ahead. Thank you. Tier 3.
Okay, final tier, guys. Thanks for sticking around with me and not falling asleep. So tier 3 focuses on process and program improvements and efficiencies. Includes 5 recommendations. Again, all of them address multiple barriers to performance. Tier 3 items are program or process specific, could begin in the near or long term, can be completed without system upgrades, and can be completed independent of other recommendations. So again, you'll see the similar chart here for tier 3. There are 5 different recommendations here. You can see that every single one of these addresses customer centricity or customer focus. The recommendations, again, here, in the interest of time, are grouped into 3 categories: program updates for the pavement preservation program, Again, we're going to go back to utility cuts. I feel like every tier I'm talking about utility cuts. And then the final two are about internal processes related to succession planning, hiring, and contracting. And the programs, particularly the last two as described, consistently came up in qualitative interviews for improvements. So the first one, the pavement preservation program, I've described these as a street prioritization and transparency recommendations, 3.1 and 3.3. 3.1 speaks to the city's use of the PCI, or the Pavement Condition Index, to identify streets for resurfacing and slurry seals treatment. So currently, our program approach does not account for factors that influence the deterioration and protection of the street. Currently, the program approach uses dated scores in some cases to select streets. So essentially, we have a van that the city owns that drives down the streets, the right lane of the street, and it takes 3 years to complete that street survey. And so a lot of the streets that we're surveying in year one, and we're using those scores to actually make choices about where we spend money, could be a little bit dated, or outdated rather. And finally, we have a reactive approach to street maintenance activities like potholes. And so the recommendation actually recommends updating the pavement methodology to be inclusive not only of the PCI score, but considering a multi-factor formula that could include volume of traffic, which obviously plays a part in deterioration of our streets, the type of vehicles for like bus lanes. BSS had done a study internally where they discovered that it was almost a 1 to 4 deterioration rate. So if an average street without bus lane traffic lasted 16 years, a street with bus lane traffic, which actually deteriorated in 4 years. And so those types of data points, again, are important when we try to prioritize when and where we're making street improvements. Again, proximity to schools, hospitals, senior centers, all of that data lives in different places right now, so we just need to figure out a way to combine those data in one common platform or a spreadsheet, and then use all of those data points to help us prioritize our streets. Again, another data point I mentioned is reactive approach to potholes. We want to cross-reference historical maintenance records. We want to look at the requests that are coming in through the LA301 system, which we don't reference at present, and look at the state of the streets. So obviously we have streets that have, like, let's say 30 pothole requests on a certain street. We know that there's a problem with that street, but right now we don't cross-reference that data to help us make choices on the pavement preservation system. And finally, we want to use technology again, assess real-time road conditions by crowdsourcing platforms like Waze. So the city already has a master agreement with Waze, and we are currently not referencing that data. So a lot of options in the Waze things to report a pothole, report construction, report an accident. And so if we were able to, again, cross-reference apps that people are already using to provide us real-time road conditions, that again will help us strengthen the way we deliver our pavement preservation programs. And then finally, just being transparent with our customers again, posting their paving plan. Currently, we have a 30-day required notice legally that we're supposed to tell or flyer our neighborhoods where they're going to be affected by street work. But our system, or our program rather, is preset in the fiscal year, and so there's no reason for us to really have a tentative, if you wanted to call it a tentative, schedule posted online, even using just a simple Google Doc, which doesn't require city funds at all. And again, it's about that lack of visibility with the public on our street improvement plans. So again, it's about enhancing the relationship with the public by sharing preset plans. So this is not only for our residential community, but this is also for our business community, because they're able to see then when the city is expected to do work on certain neighborhoods, and helps them prioritize work as well, and it helps BSS in coordinating and staying on the phone and going back and forth with our partners. Again, it gives greater notice to homeowners, businesses, corridors about paving plans, and again, it promotes transparency by sharing plans with constituents. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's questions on these two recommendations.
Any questions on Tier 3?
And that's on 3.1, updating the pavement methodology, or just simply posting the paving plan.
And I would only just make the statement for the record, Ms. Alcrush, that I know that you've had a number of briefings with the Assistant General Manager at, the Assistant Director, I should say, at the Bureau of Street Services regarding these pavement preservation plan proposals.
Yeah, and there has been council files, like I mentioned the bus lanes, where they have tried to think about updating the methodology. I just don't think there's been uniform consensus yet on what that would look like, and so the adoption of this recommendation or report back would help identify what that framework could look like through an inclusive process.
Okay. Thank you. So nothing else on Tier 3?
Okay. So we have 3 more to go. The next one, again, I'm going back to street cut recommendations, 3.5, and this is about the people who are actually the worker bees in the street. A lot of time what happens when we issue permits through the engineering is that the utility partners will actually hire a subcontractor to do the work, so they don't have city crews like we do. And so when an inspector will show up, a lot of times it's a subcontractor, and so they're not identified necessarily on the permit, although I think we're working to improve that line item. And so currently, the process to cut into a taxpayer-funded street requires applying for a permit from engineering, coordinating underground work, street services, procuring approval for a traffic control plan, in some cases through transportation, and then procuring final inspection by contract administration. So the concerns related to utility cuts include the lack of accountability when a subcontractor completes work versus a permittee, lack of adherence to city protocol, so are they actually repairing the street to city standards, the lack of quality trench work, because academic research shows that if the street was not repaired to the proper standard, within a year it will settle. And when a street settles, it turns into a pothole. And the potholes come in as a 311 request. And so the work that's being remedied, again, maybe remnants of utility cut that may be warrantied for a city partner or a utility partner. And so we need to be cognizant of when we're spending taxpayer funds and when that work really needs to be repaired by a city partner. And so to both allow maintenance of underground assets and the surface of the street, to protect these assets, the city can work with its partners to do this. Preserve expected street lifespan by restoring the street, again, according to the protocol indicated on the permit. Ensuring compliance with city standards by calling for a final inspection, as noted on the permit. Educating subcontractors on acceptable work products. In many cases, a subcontractor who is completing work and may not be familiar with city protocol. And finally, we just want to ensure that the underground assets are protected by having subcontractors make timely repairs to deficient work. And again, this is all about protecting a city-owned, taxpayer-owned city asset. And all of us walk, again, skateboard, bike on these streets, and we all feel the impact in different ways when a street's not repaired correctly. And so this recommendation is really just putting a nail in the coffin in terms of underscoring the importance of people cutting to the street and all the different players who are really operating in and trying to maintain and access those underground assets. So are there any questions on 3.5?
No, other than Commissioner Davis might still skateboard, but I don't do much of the skate.
I like to identify
But
all
I
of
do
the
notice
users.
that more and more people are skateboarding on our sidewalks and other street apparatus that is not necessarily built for skateboarding. But that's another issue. Go ahead. But no questions on this. But other than to say that, again, this is something that I fully support. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay, final section, guys. So internal support process recommendations, this is 3.2 and 3.4. 3.2 is about succession planning and training. So as you guys know, approximately, 3.2 acknowledges the large percentage of the workforce who are retirement eligible over the next 2 years. Within public works, approximately 42% of the department can choose to live in the city, taking with them a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge. There are divisions within the department that will not only lose their lead, but their second and third level of leadership. So they might completely wipe out 3 levels of institutional knowledge in those areas. To properly equip future leaders to lead the city's complex infrastructure programs, the city needs to go beyond just creating succession plans to actually implementing them and providing consistent tools that are available to our employees at present. And so the ideas that came up through the research process to mitigate the impact of losing these seasoned professionals include developing regular training regimens for middle management and department leaders, develop rotational opportunities to aid division-level managers that participate in multi-bureau and departmental programs, empower employees to bring forward process and program improvements in a consistent way, which is not available to them now. And then the last recommendation, 3.4, is about the contract process, which is just a citywide issue that's not unique necessarily to Public Works. The report recognizes the ad hoc committee for contract reform within the department and the city's effort to recruit the city's first ever chief procurement officer. Some of the current challenges facing the city in this area include the length of construction contract processing time, the lack of consistent accountability standards for contractors who are supporting service delivery. The contract language is not consistent necessarily about providers about when and where payments are made, and the change order processing time. Ideas to improve these challenges include contractor payouts that are based on strict goals and outcomes, not volume of work or activities. Strategic vendor management by accounting for historical contractor performance in the awarding of bids. Better understanding of the current state of service delivery prior to contractor commencing work. And minimizing change orders on contracts. all of which will lead to maximizing taxpayer funds for city projects. So again, these are consistent issues that have come up. They're fairly universal bottlenecks that were identified through the 400 and plus interviews. And so I'll pause here for questions on 3.2, 3.4, again related to succession planning, hiring, and the contracting process.
Well, I'm still consistently unsuccessful in convincing the city attorney's office and even the CAO's office that I could implement a moratorium on retirements. Nobody seems to want to buy that, although I keep trying to peddle it. So, what's that? So we continue to have them, and I suspect that we always will. Part of the progression of life. But that said, succession planning is key. I will say, to our bureau head's credit, certainly in our administration, I can't speak as much, obviously, to before we were here, but it's something that our mayor has focused the attention of our bureau directors on, and we've made progress, and we see it in that arena. But you certainly have highlighted the problem, which it will be helpful for us to address. I don't have any further questions for beyond those statements. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I just have some comment. Well, first, in terms of succession planning, we've talked about succession planning for almost a decade now, and so this is certainly a welcomed area of research and finding for us to embrace in some way or another. And then finally, in terms of my comments, improving contract process, I think, is also equally important. And you did ask that we look at the way in which contractor payouts are based on goals and outcomes. We didn't approach, and it's certainly a very complex issue in terms of inclusion, business inclusion in those areas, which is certainly a very persistent area of achievement, not only in this city, but in this county. And so I don't know to what degree, given all of the laws that California has, that should have been perhaps something that we would have broached in some way or explored in some way. So, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Anything? I'm sorry, let me put on my glasses. Commissioner? Yes. Anything else? One more slide? Okay, yes, one more slide.
So this is just a recap about the key takeaways. I have offered a lot of information in a short amount of time, and so basically it's going to come...
Let me interrupt you for a moment. Yes, you've offered a lot of information in a short amount of time, but you have landed the plane on completion 3 minutes prior to the time that we had at least... So your timing is terrific, although I know we have some final comments. So kudos for that, but go ahead.
I tried. Okay, so essentially I just want to recap with some key takeaways about how we currently deliver and how we could deliver these services. If you see the chart before you on the recap, currently the city does not operate as a unified infrastructure system. It operates heavily in silos, and adoption of Tier 1 especially will fix the system by creating a system for the first time in the city's history where you have the cross-consideration of the user of the street and the public right-of-way with overlapping oversight for the first time in the city's history, which will be a huge benefit for the long-term success of these programs. Currently, there's no cross-analysis or impact of infrastructure programs, and this is where the Office of Infrastructure Management would provide a holistic strategic lens on the overall infrastructure network. We'd be looking at intersections and the complete street experience instead of individual silos in the colored boxes that I showed you on the graphic. Currently, we have no common priorities or goals across the public right-of-way programs. Having, again, these programs under the jurisdiction of the board can identify and apply shared priorities to agencies under its purview. Currently, there's no accountability for street programs across, again, hardscape and softscape programs. And this distributed accountability really results in poor coordination, some of the key barriers to performance that were identified in the report. And again, through the consolidation of that accountability for public right-of-way programs, we have better opportunities for optimal efficiency, better coordinated planning, and better coordinated execution. And finally, we have to address the lack of transparency, the uneven, inconsistent citizen input opportunities for transportation programs at present. And again, I think the board president identified this by, again, using an existing city resource that's before as today with the board to provide a permanent outlet for citizen engagement and feedback. And just to underscore this point, if this report moves forward in trying to break up the different components, for example, moving forward with Tier 1, with Tier 2 or Tier 3 without moving on Tier 1, it will not result in the expected efficiencies for the city. You have to fix the system by establishing a system first. You have to have some level of oversight and a creation of an infrastructure ecosystem that will really provide the long-term benefits that our residents require and deserve, frankly. And so, again, I just want to underscore that point about addressing Tier 2 and Tier 3 without establishing a system will not result in the efficiencies expected by the city. So with that, I close the report. I thank you for your attention and your questions, and I'm happy to hear any final thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Alcaraz. You did that precisely in the time allotted. So thank you for the preparation and the summary and the organization of your report and the presentation. Commissioner Repenning.
I just want to thank you for all of your work. You and Patty and Rich and David, we really appreciate all the research, and I know you, Ms. Alcaraz, have spent 2 years really drilling down into the work of this department and looking for ways to improve what we do. So we just want to thank you for your involvement, for the report. I look forward to the ongoing discussion around your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Repenning. Commissioner Davis.
I also want to thank you for the research and the impact that I think it will have in the future and the recommendations that you have made. You certainly have given us much to think, ponder, explore, and I'm sure that this report will make a difference. Of note to me is the recommendation to add to the service delivery we have in Public Works with another department in terms of transportation. And I know historically years ago, I think it used to be a part of Public Works. So I think that that is a very interesting, dynamic recommendation to this report. So thank you so much for your research.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, and I also just want to echo my colleagues in thanking the, thank you, Commissioner Cinto. I didn't see your light there. We'll let Commissioner Cinto drive it home, but I just want to thank the team, and it is a team from the City Administrator's Office. We always appreciate your support of Public Works and your advocacy for us, and also sometimes telling us things that we don't necessarily want to hear. But because you do that, we are collectively able to proceed onward. But I do see a real opportunity here, and we're very happy with that we have so much support from the CAO's office across the board regarding our department. Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James and colleagues. I really have benefited greatly from this process, from being around the last 2 years and the leadership of our CAO's office and your participation, and everybody's leadership is greatly appreciated. For a city to be great, it needs to be interdependent. Silos versus this whole idea that we're working together is a no-brainer, but it's so difficult given our culture and where we've been. And I think I believe that our mayor and this administration and the city council is moving ourselves to an opportunity where we can be world-class as we are and prepare in a decade for the world's largest event to enroll. And it's going to be in a city, and as we envision it now, and as we have the parts here, that we can take this rationale and the great work and all the analysis and implement difficult things. We can do this because we have rationale, we have data. So I'm very appreciative. All these things I'm going to help work on in the areas, especially the training and development. We're doing that with our Bureau of Engineering and our Bureau of Street Lighting, and it's all about how do we engage the next generation. So right on, Lila, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Anything further? I anticipate, Lila, having you back again once the report completes its way through council. The oral report today is received, and then we will reconvene as appropriate then. So the discussion continues. We appreciate it. Thank you. So with that, Mr. Executive Officer, have we cleared the desk?
Yes, you have.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.